Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the top use cases for integrating threat intelligence with SOAR. I'm really excited for the content and presentation that we have prepared for you today. But before we begin, I do want to quickly mention that this session is being recorded and the recording will be shared out with everyone later today upon the conclusion of this session via email for you to rewatch at your convenience. And additionally, we will be hosting a Q&A at the end of this webinar, so feel free to use the control panel at the bottom of your screen to ask those questions at any point in time, and we'll help address all of those at the end. Again, we want this to be very engaging, very informative, so please feel free to use that chat function, and we can get things started. Next slide, please, Harrison. Awesome. So today I'll kick things off with a very quick introduction to myself and my co-speaker Harrison, as well as Simplify. And then we'll get right into the basics and benefits of SOAR and TIP. And then Harrison will walk us through the top 4 use cases that we've outlined for combining and integrating SOAR and TIP. And then he'll actually demonstrate what that looks like. Obviously, we being Simplify, we're going to demo this in our own SOAR environment with our own integrated TIP platform. However, the use cases and information that we're providing today, we really want it to be as informative and useful as possible. So in theory, you should be able to take this information back and use it in your very own SOCs, regardless of what SOAR or what threat intel platform you're using. And then, like I said, we'll cap things off with a Q&A. So joining me today is Harrison Parker, a senior solutions architect here at Simplify. He has years of experience in cybersecurity, and he actually formerly worked at Anomaly, so I can't think of anyone better to talk about both SOAR and TIP together. And I myself, my name is Christopher Mitchell. I'm the demand generation manager here at Simplify. And like I said, I'll just kick things off with a very quick intro, and then I'll moderate the Q&A at the end, but Harrison is going to be delivering all the goods during this presentation.
Thanks for the intro, Chris.
So real quickly about Simplify. As a company, we are rooted in security operations, or as we like to say, we were born in the SOC. Our company was founded by security operations experts who worked in a government SOC and then moved on to train dozens and dozens of both military and civilian SOCs from around the world. They founded the company and developed Simplify based on their experiences and everything that a security operations team needs to succeed. We're the leading independent security operations platform, and we're trusted by the biggest and best enterprises and MSSPs from around the world. Many of the Fortune 500 companies and Gartner Magic Quadrant MSSPs trust Simplify as the platform to run their security operations day in and day out. And we believe this is clearly reflected in our Gartner Peer Insights reviews, where we're the #1 rated SOAR platform. And finally, we're designed with you, the customer, in mind, providing rapid time to value, flexibility, and the power to close the gap between on-prem and cloud security operations, which is more important now than ever with the hybrid workforce and currently evolving work environments. So looking at sort of the basics of SOAR, according to Gartner, SOAR refers to technologies that enable organizations to collect inputs monitored by the security operations team, where incident response and analysis and triage can all be performed by leveraging a combination of human and machine power while standardizing all incident response activities. And from there, Gartner actually says that SOAR is pretty much made up of these primary technologies, these 3 incident response platforms, orchestration and automation, and actually threat intel platforms. So the best SOAR and the best TIP are ones that are integrated. So with SOAR, you can now digest alerts, enrich and visualize threats, integrate and automate workflows and playbooks, and manage cases end to end, all from a single platform. And so the benefits then of combining SOAR and TIP and integrating SOAR and TIP, I mean, the benefits are really endless, from threat and alert aggregation and prioritization, faster event triage and investigations, fewer false positives, the ability to sort of evolve from reactive security posture to a more proactive security posture, and things of that nature. And that's really where the use cases that we're going to be talking about today come in. We'll discuss how you can automate alert enrichment with deep intelligence for an accurate triage decisions, how you can proactively detect and respond to new malicious indicators of compromise, or IOCs, as you'll see, ingested via the threat intel platform. You'll be able to scale and repeat threat hunting programs within your organization and environment. And you'll also be able to leverage closed loop threat intel and sharing the threat indicators within and outside of your organization. So that is my quick 5-minute intro. And from here, I will hand things over to Harrison.
Awesome. Hey, well done, Chris. So yeah, so the majority of the webinar today is going to be covering some of the more interesting use cases, the ways in which you can truly leverage the strengths of a threat intelligence platform with a SOAR platform. I would actually view these as almost essential beginning points. And from these initial sets of use cases, I would continue to build on to what we've started with here and make them more complicated and make them more specific to your environment and your needs. But we're going to go over all four. We have 4 of them here for you. The first one is triage and investigation. Now, of course, when we're leveraging threat intelligence, one of the most dominant and common ways you're going to use the threat intelligence is as a reference point. So triaging, of course, refers to the act of diagnosing or determining your level of threat. So that is what we're doing at the beginning here. The idea is to take any sort of security alert, whether it's from your SIEM or your endpoint or whatever, and use your threat intelligence platform as a reference to verify or maybe even just initially detect malicious indicators inside of your security alert. Once we've identified if an indicator is malicious or not, then we want to determine the severity of the ones we found. Is this something that is truly terrible, or is this just like a scanning IP that's just looking for open ports? Maybe that's a pretense to something more nefarious later, but it isn't malicious for the time being, and we can dismiss the alert. Once we find out which ones are malicious and we know the severity of those malicious indicators, we may want to expand the indicator pool. So we want to find out if there's hosted malware on a web server, and if any of our assets have actually touched that malware that's hosted on that web server. This really sets us up nicely for any sort of expansive threat hunting scenario. But what we're going to do in this case is just perform a basic investigation. So rather than doing a full in-depth retrospective threat hunting task here, we're going to just search for the assets that have touched the range of indicators that we've been able to fetch. On top of that, we want to make sure that it's really clear. Oftentimes, when you're working with threat intelligence and with multiple alerts that are grouped together in a SOAR like ours, it's important to make it obvious to the analysts to which this incident is assigned to, what's happened when and how important the intelligence is that's been discovered inside of that ticket. So you want to do things like prioritizing tickets in a really clear way, adding tags, and just making the information really obvious, maybe adding some notes so that way that analyst can work as efficiently as possible. Second use case we're going to talk about, surprise, also has triage. But in this one, we're actually going to do a little bit more research here. Now, part of the benefit of a threat intelligence platform is not only having a nice pool of indicators of compromise, malicious URLs, malicious file hashes, and the like, but also interconnecting that intelligence and enriching the intelligence with context. This is really big because if you get a big fish hit to like command and control infrastructure, you're probably going to want to know who set up that infrastructure and what the scope and scale of that infrastructure is. Additionally, it can give you all sorts of helpful information, such as the actor group's motivation, what kind of malware they've deployed in the past, what are they usually looking for, so that way you can predict where they're going to go and potentially cut them off at the pass if you're hitting them right at the start of the breach. So this is really meant for large scale, dangerous hits that you want to dive more deeply into. It can also apply to smaller things too as well. If, for example, a vulnerability is associated with some malware, but really the possibilities are endless. But this use case is designed to just get you started. So once again, we do our triaging, which is going to involve examining the indicators, determining if we have bad ones, how bad they are, and then after that, fetching related indicators so that we have our full spread of IOCs. And then after that, as you predicted, we're going to just do that large scale enrichment, check for actor groups, check for vulnerabilities, whatever our threat intelligence platform is packing in its database. And we're going to pull all that down so that's nice, hot, and convenient for the analyst to make decisions. Now, this is really the ideal setup for threat hunting, because not only do you have the big IOCs, and that's going to be what you're going to search for in your SIM, but also you know how important it is to do a full retrospective threat hunt. The next one is pretty interesting. So with the other two use cases, what we were doing was taking a security ticket or alert or case, and then enriching and fetching from the threat intelligence platform. What makes this use case so interesting is that we can actually use the live threat intelligence that is coming into our tip, and oftentimes a good threat intelligence platform is set up to automatically ingest new IOCs using threat feeds, whether it's open source or premium sources of intelligence. Oftentimes, these threat intelligence platforms are ingesting and receiving brand new information all the time. So we want to take advantage of the fact that it's almost like a live stream feed of new intel being published, and we'd like to automatically pop in indicators that we are particularly interested in into our security system to protect us and also make sure that we haven't been hit already. So the first thing we need to do is define a high severity watch list inside of our threat intelligence platform. In this case, the one we're going to show off is ThreatFuse, and we'll discuss what ThreatFuse is and show off what's going on there in just a few moments. But just think of this as searching through your intelligence database and defining which ones are important to you. This obviously depends on your organization and what your needs are. So if you're getting hit by a lot of phishing, and that's something you need to prioritize in terms of what goes into your firewall and what you have being actively monitored, so if that is your requirement, then you're going to want to go into your threat intelligence platform and define a filter that isolates those phishing indicators. Once you've written that filter, oftentimes these tools will have a simple API endpoint that is packaged into our integration library that allow you to search for that set of indicators. This allows you to set up what we call a connector inside of Simplify. And all that is just a periodic job that runs that API call and fetches all those indicators that meet the filter requirements you've established. So you can see in this graphic here, we've decided that the IOCs in red are the ones we really want to target. And so now whenever a red IOC comes into our pool, we're going to bring that down. And the first thing we're going to do is step 2, which is make sure that IOC is protected inside of our firewall. Then once that's in place, we want to make sure that the IOC hasn't already gotten past our firewall before we knew about it. And that's actually one of the Achilles heels of threat intelligence, is that you're only going to be as protected as the rest of the good guys can detect new intelligence. So this is really big. Threat intelligence is not the end solution of cybersecurity, but it does give you a huge boost, protecting you against threats that are known by other organizations and other cybersecurity professionals. So once we have that in the firewall, we want to address that sort of Achilles heel and retrospectively search in our environment to see if the indicator is already there. And any sort of match, since of course in step 1, we've defined that these indicators are very high severity and things we don't want to see in our environment. any match that we've found touching an asset, especially if it's a high importance asset, we're going to want to escalate that to a higher tier in the SOC. And then the final use case is perhaps the most important one. And as I alluded to in the previous use case, threat intelligence is only as good as the community is able to actively share. Now, there's all sorts of feeds out there. You have open source feeds, you have information sharing communities, which are groups of like, let's say if you're in the airline business, it's groups of airlines that are sharing intelligence with each other. And then, of course, you also have industry professionals, private companies that specialize in publishing intel, whether it's automatically from the internet, or if they have a dedicated team of analysts that maybe are native Russian speakers and they're gathering intel from forums. Whatever feed you select, usually you're going to select a group. It all gets organized into the threat intelligence platform. So it's a good idea to take on that sort of spirit, that mantra, that practice of sharing the intelligence that you discover in your environment back into the threat intelligence platform. Now, depending on what threat intelligence platform you have, the ability to publish intelligence is going to be limited by that tool. So for example, if you're in a cloud-based threat intelligence platform, publishing that intelligence to other members of that platform is going to be easier, typically. Now, I don't mean to speak for all threat intelligence platforms, but usually that's the case. If you have a local threat intelligence platform, you're probably just using it for you and your organization, and it's just like a local database that you want to reference. Regardless, whether it's cloud or whether it's local, you should absolutely be publishing new intelligence you discover. Why? Because if you're using the threat intelligence platform as a reference to decide what goes in your firewall, what doesn't, what goes in your endpoint tool, what doesn't, it's important to keep that library up to date. So you don't want to reinvent the wheel, discover new intelligence after it's been slipped through the cracks, and then not have the SOAR automatically be protecting you from that because it's using your threat intelligence as a pool, as a reference. So this is very critical, and I really want to emphasize this as a important piece in the threat intelligence puzzle. To use this and simplify, what we've done is we've made what's called a block. And a block is just a miniature playbook that you can drag and drop in any one of your other playbooks. So the idea is you should be adding this to every playbook where you discover new intelligence that your tip did not know about. So you're going to want to put this everywhere. So let's go ahead and take a look at what these actually look like here. So I popped over to Simplify, and I've got the actual use cases that we have here. And of course, this is featuring the platform that we've OEM'd. Think of it as like an add-on to the SOAR platform. We call it ThreatFuse. And so ThreatFuse here is going to be sort of our demonstration technology for today, but we have very comprehensive other integrations with popular threat intelligence platforms like MISP, like Threat Connect, you name it. So whatever your bread and butter is, we can plug it in. The first one I want to take a look at is the triage and investigation. And this is just a sort of a sample here to get you an idea of what Simplify is capable of and how you would actually sort of drag and drop the steps here. So in this case, we want to triage any kind of alert. This can be any alert, doesn't have to be a phishing alert. Any alert that's got some indicators of compromise inside of it that we want to take a look at, that's something that we're going to launch this playbook on. And the first thing we're going to do is launch a standardized triage process. And that's what this green rectangle here represents. It is a mini playbook, what we call a block. And in this block, we have standardized how we do our threat intelligence lookups to classify individual security cases. So in this case, we are fetching information on the indicators of compromise in the security alert. And then after that, and that's what each of these individual blue rectangles represents, are actions or calls out to the API of the tool we've integrated into the platform. So we do that. And then after that, we essentially fetch related associations to the threat intelligence. So that's going to be other IP addresses, other hashes, anything that's connected to the original set that you had in your first security ticket here. After that, we also want to go ahead and add some tags that come from our threat intelligence, because that's going to enrich and sort of make our security incident sharper, finer tuned, and clearer to the analyst, and searchable also later. If we found anything at all, this little rectangle says, hey, we found a number of indicators. Let's pipe that out and send that to the main playbook. So that's the idea there, very straightforward, but a very standard sort of initial approach to threat intelligence. And of course, the next step is a purple rectangle here, which represents analyzing a condition. So the condition that we're analyzing is if anything was found inside this triage block. And if you double click it, you can see here, we're referencing the block and we're seeing if any of the indicators that were included in the initial ticket were greater than 0. If that's the case, then that's something we want to sort of escalate here. So now we know this is in fact a security incident, whereas before we would probably go through a process to close out that ticket. Now that we're up here, we're going to want to do a full investigation. That's the idea. That's the name of the use case, into the extent and the scope of which those malicious indicators are in our environment. So in this case, we're using like a sample endpoint tool, Sentinel-1. But the idea here is that you can take this sort of block here and then customize it with like Carbon Black or whatever your endpoint tool is. So what we're doing is we're checking the IOCs that were malicious. We're forming a query to see if any of our assets actually contain the file hashes that have been identified. And then we're executing that query on our endpoint tool. We do the same thing for URLs. And then depending on what we found, we then just sort of surface the results, fetch some MITRE enrichment, present the information in a compelling way to the analyst. And that is our first use case here. And we're going to take a look at what surface threat intelligence looks like in the main platform shortly. So now that we understand the triage process and how that's a standard thing that we're often going to want to start in our playbooks, let's take a look at the second use case, which is enrichment and triage. We call that same triage block, which is again the lookup of the initial sets of indicators, checking the URLs, the file hashes, email addresses, you name it, and seeing if the threat intelligence platform knows anything malicious about it. After that, we then decide to do a full enrichment. So we want to go ahead and run this block, which is going to fetch the actors, the vulnerabilities, whatever else you really want to take a deeper dive into, or we're going to simply close out the case. Now, this one is designed to be more plug and play, less sort of specific. This you can toss in at the beginning of any of your playbooks to sort of get things going. The next one we want to cover is the proactive defense. So this one is actually looking for any indicators that are freshly published into the threat intelligence platform. Then once that's in place, we want to go ahead and immediately toss those into our firewall. And then we want to do those investigations that we saw in the first use case, which is using our, in this case, our endpoint tool to do a query, see what endpoints have touched the malicious IOCs, and then surface those up to the analysts, escalate if necessary. Now, this can be done with a SIM. Again, it's all dependent on what your technology stack is. And then the final use case that we want to take a look at is the one that I emphasized greatly at the end of the sort of deck portion of this webinar. And that is going to be the submission of IOCs. So this is going to count the number of essentially entities. We call them entities, but you can think of them as indicators in this example. So indicators that we found to be suspicious in our own day-to-day security operations. So obviously these would be indicators that are not discovered by the threat intel platform. And then if any of those were marked by our analysts or by other tools, maybe a sandbox has discovered that a file hash is malicious, you want to make sure those are sent up to your threat intelligence platform. So we just sort of send those indicators and we can set up different conditionals to classify those, again, depending on what our previous actions are, which is why, of course, this is a block. So you want to just drag and drop this anywhere in your security practices, your other playbooks. Then we send those up into the threat intelligence platform. Now they're hot and ready for the rest of our playbooks to take advantage of. So those are the 4 use cases. Now, what's interesting is these are all available inside of what we call our marketplace, which is essentially a published location where we make our pre-packaged playbooks available to the rest of our user community. You can also publish custom integrations into our marketplace. So we're going to take a look at that in just a moment. But for now, let's take a look at what that threat intelligence lookup looks like inside of the platform. So here we have a command and control traffic case. And what's interesting about this is that this is the combination of 3 separate security alerts. We can see here the first alert is coming in from, if we take a look at it here, Cisco Firepower. And this is an IRC connections alert. We then see a virus discovered. It's probably on the same endpoint. And it looks like this is coming in from CrowdStrike. And then we also have an out of working hours login, again, on the same endpoint. So one of the main sort of attractions of Simplify is the ability to group these intelligently together. So you can see the breakdown of the attack vector and sort of where it's coming from. But as a part of our playbook, we've actually done a full lookup to ThreatFuse, and we've found that a file hash was actually malicious. So we can see here that file hash, it's been isolated out of the security ticket, and it's been given a sort of red color here, which indicates that it is in fact a malicious indicator. And if we scroll up here, we actually executed our full enrichment playbook. So we can get a lot of really great details from our threat intelligence platform. In this case, it seems like the file hash is a part of a campaign, which is very interesting. So we can see here the top threat types that are associated with the campaign. We get a nice little detailed blurb here. So in case we haven't heard about this, we can sort of catch up. And if we want to dig in deeper into the threat intelligence platform, we just click on this link, and that's going to take us straight to our threat intelligence platform, which is going to break down more information about this campaign. Looks like this campaign had something to do with COVID-19. So seeing that it is associated with phishing and COVID-19, perhaps we had one of our users in our organization click on a phishing link, and that's why we're seeing this here. So let me pivot back over here. Yeah, so that's what that looks like when we do a lookup into ThreatFuse. Now, I want to just sort of briefly discuss what an indicator sort of looks like in a threat intelligence platform and sort of the operational purpose of IOCs. First of all, I want to point out that once again, this is the marketplace in our platform. It is the home of all integrations, and it's also the home of use cases. So we see that here. But these indicators that we're using to reference, they need to be really nice and clean inside our threat intelligence platform, so they can tell us, hey, what is this indicator used for? What is the certainty that this indicator is in fact this classification? And we can get more information like passive DNS, but more critically for our playbooks, we want to know if there are any actors associated, any campaigns, vulnerabilities, malware, et cetera. So this is the data we're leveraging from an operational standpoint inside the SOAR. So making sure you have a good setup using your TIP is absolutely essential. So let's pivot back over and let's discuss a couple of points here. Of course, it's in the wrong orientation. All right, that's better. So let's talk a little bit about SOAR and TIP as it combines together. As Chris mentioned, the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, it combines the two of them into sort of one harmonious quadrant, right? So the idea is that the SOAR should be using the TIP as a reference point, and the SOAR should actually be publishing new intelligence into the TIP. The idea is to reduce complexity in terms of what sources of intel you use, because the tip is a natural organization point for all your different threat intelligence feeds. And that's a whole nother subject we could dive into in another webinar. But just know that that is really the purpose of a threat intelligence platform. Once you've consolidated that, organized it, you have all your ducks in a row, you're going to be set up for a lot more success with your SOAR operations, because threat intelligence is so useful. There are tons and tons of use cases that expect some kind of threat intelligence lookup, whether it's to VirusTotal, or to your threat intelligence platform, or to a threat intelligence exchange. It really is tightly related to SOAR. Now, when it comes to ThreatFuse, like I said, is our OEM'd out of the box, pre-configured with these nice integrations, these nice use cases, threat intelligence platform that we've selected to give you this functionality. So what's nice is we've already built the playbooks. I just showed you them. You download them, you deploy them, and you can start using your threat intelligence practically. And what's nice is it just has that harmonious sort of relationship of publish, use, publish, etc. So yeah, so Chris, over to you to talk about the community.
Awesome. So quickly, right before we jump into the Q&A, I did want to quickly mention that we do have a free community edition of the Simplify platform. You can go to simplify.co/community, download our community edition. And as Harrison has mentioned and shown us, there is literally a marketplace where you can download ready to deploy use cases, integrations, connectors, whatever you need to get up and running immediately with SOAR. And it is literally a fully functioning platform. So you can build playbooks, you can integrate your existing security solutions, respond to real security alerts that you're ingesting from your SIM or what have you. And best of all, as part of downloading the community edition of the platform, you also gain access to our literal security operations community and Slack channel where you can connect and with fellow cybersecurity professionals. You can discuss with SOAR experts at Simplify. Our community is actually very active. Community members themselves can actually publish their own use cases and integrations in our marketplace, which is pretty cool as well. So feel free to check that out. But with that, we'll jump into the Q&A. So just a reminder, you can use the control panel at the bottom of your screen to ask those questions. But we've already had a few come through. So looking at the first one, someone would like to know, how do you tune the intel in your threat intel platform using SOAR?
Yeah, that's a great question, Chris. So here's the thing, is that when you have a SOAR that's properly set up, it should have most of your security tools properly integrated. So when you have that in combination with a SOAR, there's all sorts of really valuable metrics that you can take away. For example, which one of your products that you're using in your security operations is generating the most amount of noise? And also conversely, which ones are actually providing you true security incidents that you should be concerned about? So not only do you have the ability to tune your SOAR, but you also have the ability to tune your other tools. So when it comes to directly tuning the SOAR, once you have an idea of sort of which tools seem to be ringing true and useful and practical, etc., that lends itself to then relying on those tools to potentially confirm and generate new intelligence in the SOAR. Also, when you're examining the tools that you think are really generating true positives, you can use Simplify's dashboards and reporting metrics to do overall examinations into the kinds of attacks that you're getting. So for example, are we mostly getting, I know I used this before, but phishing attacks? Okay, in that case, I may want to bolster up my phishing intelligence in my tip, so that way I'm catching more phishing cases and I'm automatically remediating them. Or maybe I want to adjust my playbooks to be more phishing heavy to sort of stop these at the source and basically automatically improve my security operations. So long-winded answer, but just a couple of thoughts on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Harrison. Another question, how would you recommend a team split their time between SOAR and TIP, or are you able to spend all of your time in just SOAR?
Oh, yeah, that's another really good one. So this comes up a lot. And this is almost like a stylistic thing. Once again, you can use Simplify, and in my opinion, you should be using Simplify to optimize the time of your analysts. At the end of the day, that's really what a SOAR is all about, is to reduce the pain and strain on the analysts, but in such a way that's still effective for your security operations. So automating the sort of low-level things, that should be your priority. Now, when you bring the threat intelligence platform into the mix, I just showed you briefly the ThreatFuse UI, and you can see that it has its uses. It does a really nice in-depth dive into an individual indicator. It allows you to browse and peruse all your different IOCs so that you can set up, for example, the proactive defense use case more effectively. There's a lot of reasons why you'd want to pivot into that UI. But of course, we don't want to introduce too much complexity to the security operations. So my personal recommendation is to use the threat intelligence platform in two ways. Number one is for configuration. So determining how you want to set up your threat intelligence to take a look at what kind of indicators the SOAR is going to be drawing from. And also you can use, for example, ThreatFuse to analyze the quality of new threat feeds that you're using to bolster up the quantity of IOCs. So from a configuration standpoint, it's just sort of checking the health of the fish in your pond. The other use for it is an in-depth investigation style. So if you get a big fish, you catch something big, it's in your environment, holy smokes, we have North Korea and they just took all of our trade secrets, something like that. You probably are going to get pretty obsessed about that profile. I almost think of it like maybe you get freaked out about a skin rash you have, and the doctor confirms it's something really bad. Well, you're going to probably do a lot of Google searching on that skin rash, and having good quality intel, that's reliable, that's telling you accurate things about that medical condition is going to be really important. And you'll probably want to use that information to make medical decisions. So you're going to want to have a really good doctor, just to extend the analogy there. But my point being is that you can use it in a configuration sense, and then you also use it to do deep dive investigation into a big hit. And those would be sort of my top two recommendations there.
Thanks, Harrison. Looks like we have two more quick questions about the Simplify platform, actually. Okay. The first one is, are we multi-tenant?
Yeah, the answer is yes. In fact, that's actually one of Simplify's strengths. And this is really interesting because it relates with SOAR. If you're using a threat intelligence platform to serve multiple customers and tenants, again, one of our strengths, having a consolidated source of threat intelligence that does a nice broad coverage of all your different customers, and the fact that they have different industrial verticals, that's going to be quite important. So establishing a good combination of the two, I think should be a point of focus for you and your team. But yes, Simplify not only specializes in multi-tenancy, but we have a plethora of other convenient features for MSSPs.
Thanks, Harrison. And the last question is quickly, if I don't currently have a SIM solution, is there still value in using SOAR?
Oh man, that's another really good question. I would say absolutely. The only time when I would say maybe you should purchase other solutions first is when you're really sort of thin on the security tools. But there are absolutely organizations that have a number of other security tools, and they can completely take advantage of a SOAR platform. You just have to identify what are going to be your alert sources. So a SIEM isn't necessarily the one-stop shop for all your security alerts. Oftentimes your endpoint tool is going to be generating a lot of security alerts. And a SOAR is a great combination with an endpoint tool because it can automatically close out the noise. And an endpoint tool generates a lot of security alerts. It would be really nice to have 50% of those automatically investigating using our threat intelligence platform and close that out, and have that all be sort of properly logged for auditing purposes. So that's my answer there. You can even hook it up to your email system. So if you get phishing submissions, you can have your SOAR platform pick those apart, analyze it, and clear out all the false positives. So there's tons of ways you can use a SOAR platform, depending on how many security tools you use and what are the most common repetitive security tasks you do from a day-to-day standpoint. That would determine how you use the SOAR platform, and if you're a candidate for our enterprise platform, or if you're a candidate for the community edition, which we have on screen. So there you go, Chris.
Awesome. Thank you, Harrison, not just for answering all of those questions, but also for the presentation and demonstration. And thank you to everyone who joined us today. We sincerely appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join us. Hopefully you learned a bit here and can take this back to your own security operations teams. As mentioned, this was recorded, and I will share out this session later today via email. So with that, thank you again, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their day.